It looks like it'll just be you and me tonight.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So they'll be wanting to watch the video. So we'll have a good conversation as we work on it.
Cool.
And I look forward to. Sorry, all the questions are coming to you, so get ready.
All right, bring them on.
Um, the meditation I wanted to work on tonight is on page 21 of the Awakening text. And so I'd invite you just to close your eyes and enjoy this meditation. I'll try and, I don't have an appropriate bong that might help me. So I'll just use space to create that. So if you get in a comfortable posture, and I certainly am, breathe. Breathe again. Breathe. Breathe again. Breathe. Breathe again. Smile. Relax. Smile. Relax. Arrive. Where you are. Arrive where you are. Be natural. Open to effortlessness. Be natural. Open to effortlessness. To being rather than doing. To being rather than doing. Drop everything. Let go. Drop everything. Let go. Enjoy for a moment this marvelous joy of meditation. Enjoy for a moment this marvelous joy of meditation. Enjoy for a moment this marvelous joy of meditation. Where do you find yourself after a moment like that?
feel more deeply connected to the sense of self, and through the sense of self, or the Atman, connected to something less changing and more constant than the world that we see around us.
Oh, and then we return to the mundane. Did you have a chance to do your scriptural comparison this week?
I did, yeah.
What did you learn?
Let me pull that up real quick.
Please do. Yeah. Find the one you're most fascinated or enjoyed the most or most challenging. You pick it, but work on one.
Yeah. Yeah, I really, there was a lot of scriptures that I did enjoy reading.
Let me get the book.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that. I was resorting to my homework, but
thank you. And I think our pages are different, so just give me the section if you happen to annotate the section.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of these were quite a bit longer than the excerpts in Hinduism. Yeah, honestly, for me to pick out one right now, it's kind of difficult.
Go where your eyes go first then.
Yeah, I'll go, I think it's the last scripture, second to last scripture. It's under ritual and meditation, and it's titled "The Merit of Making Images." And it stood out to me because it was reminiscent of the Bhagavad Gita, and how Krishna would speak at times to Arjuna.
Very nice.
Arjuna, yeah.
The last one that I'm reading of is, would this be the one? The virtue of the blessed Buddha is without limit or measure, and it cannot even be thought of or talked of. That is why if a man awakens his faith and builds a Buddha image, every single one of his evil deeds will be exhausted and annulled. Is that what you're thinking of? Or
What's the title?
The Merit of Making Images.
Yeah, that is the excerpt. I wasn't picking out a specific paragraph, but
it was more a reflection on the topic itself.
Yeah, it was. Here, I'll read this section. So, and the Buddha said to the Bodhisattva, Maitreya, listen attentively. Listen attentively and ever bear in mind that I shall explain to you. Let a son of good family or a daughter of good family but be pure and faithful, and fix his mind solely upon the virtues of the Buddha, and meditate unceasingly upon his awe-inspiring virtue and majesty. Let him think upon the 10 powers of the Buddha, and upon his fourfold fearlessness, upon his 18 special qualities, and upon his great love and compassion, upon his omniscience, and upon all his signs of greatness. Let him see how every single pore of the Buddha's body glows with measureless, multicolored, brilliant light, with immensities of surpassing blessings and adornments and accomplishments, with measureless insight and perfect enlightenment, with measureless meditation and forbearance, with measureless magic and spiritual power. So that was a section that stood out to me and was significant in, I think, both paths of Hinduism and Buddhism, as far as having this idyllic image of either Krishna or Buddha as a means to meditate upon and a pathway to embodying those characteristics and seeking and finding enlightenment.
How does the image work? Psychologically, you can pick a psychological or a sociological analysis, but for the individual that doesn't, how does it work? Because the critique will be that you're focusing on the wrong place. You're focusing, and so how do you get past that critique so that you're engaging in something positive and productive in your life?
Yeah, I'm if I'm understanding what you're asking correctly, the image either of Krishna or Buddha psychologically provides a focal point, so a means to or a practice to focus on something of purity, lacking of distraction, in order to train the mind so that when we act in the physical world, that we have the same focus and the same intention to do well and to be mindful and to be purposeful with every action, so as to not waste the gift of life, and to not only as an individual, but as a global community, to move forward together towards enlightenment.
Excellent. Okay. The context of which you live in is the context of American Protestantism. And the classic move of American Protestants is to desymbolize their world. If you go into almost any other country or space, you'll see a highly symbolic world around you. And I believe, how many countries have you had a chance to visit?
Yeah, maybe just a little more than half a dozen.
Half a dozen? Wonderful.
Yeah.
Would you sense from the countries you visited that they're a much more visually symbolic culture than what you experience when you walk around Lake Tahoe?
Yes, yeah.
And so,
yeah, the place that stands out the most is Bali, Indonesia.
Okay. And so lots of symbolic presentations as you walk the streets of Bali.
Yeah, more than your eye can actually see in one glance.
Overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet you walk the streets of your community in America. Who controls the symbolism?
The church.
Okay, walk down any street. How many symbolic represent in Lake Tahoe? You're in Lake Tahoe, right?
Right now, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you walk down any street, how many church symbols do you see?
I mean, not a lot.
Okay, so what symbols do you see? So your mind first went to the church, but I'd argue, I bet there's not a lot.
No, there's not.
What symbols do you actually see in your context?
Um, I mean, none that are strikingly related to religion.
Right. So what are they related to?
Businesses.
Business. Okay. So the Protestant move was to make the business symbolism primary in the lives of Americans. That was, they desymbolized their spirituality because they wanted everyone to find the God idea not in symbols. But they did embellish the business symbolism to magnify the economic success of American towns. You still live in that context.
Why would they not want us to see God in symbolism?
Because one of the commandments is do not worship an idol. And the images of religious symbolism were interpreted as idols, such as the Catholic use of Mary, Jesus on the cross. And so religious symbols that were attached to Catholicism were eliminated. If you go into the average Protestant church, you find that it's virtually empty of symbolism except for an empty cross. That's typically all you get. They're white walls and an empty cross, as opposed to going into a Catholic cathedral, which is highly symbolic, as opposed to going into a Buddhist temple, highly symbolic. So the Protestants made a specific move to move away from religious iconography. And so now, as you live your life, the businesses have filled the void, which is why American capitalism has its success. They control the symbolic universe that defines our lives. But it's important to realize that the price of that is consumerism.
Yeah.
And your spirituality will struggle with consumerism.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So now as you walk down the next walk you go or next bike trip you go, look at the symbols that are trying to motivate you economically and realize why the spiritual lives of so many Americans is so devoid. They are struggling with a symbolless orbit. So now as you have read the Buddhist recommendation of images and recognize that that's very much a part of Buddhism, is to use the images to define the activity of their people. And so the images aren't merely for just focus. What should the image try and accomplish in the life of the adherent? When they see the, the symbolism, what should they be doing?
They should be doing that. I don't know. Is that what you're getting?
They need to know what the symbols are, so that the messages are a message of peace and mindfulness and understanding and nonviolence, and all those important images are trying to transmit those moral messages. And so as you enjoy Buddhism and you enjoy the images, you can't just stop at focus. You have to move past that to making sure you transmit the moral messages so that their lives are changed, not just their monkey minds are focused on the spiritual elements. Does that make sense?
I think so.
As you're moving deeper into Buddhism, recognize that part of your training needs to be part of understanding the symbolic universe that Buddhism presents. Hello. Okay?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's just part of it that we'll work on as well together. Good response. There's a new calendar for now through the end of the semester. Starting, we're on week 8 right now, the 22nd. And so I've edited a few things to make things work better for the course. So the iLearn is the right calendar right now. I don't think I'll change it again, but it did get changed this week. So if you built a schedule or a calendar on old material, please relook at it. I've rebuilt a single sheet, and it's a modified calendar. It's on iLearn. If you like it, your calendar's on paper, feel free to download that and work with it.
Okay.
Okay.
So I sync the calendar, I think, that's on iLearn to my calendar. So what I'm getting is that I shouldn't follow that calendar. Is that correct?
I would resync it. I've never done that. So I'm glad they have the capability of doing that.
Yeah.
I would redo it.
I will.
Okay?
Yeah.
If that's how you're organizing it. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. I think the way that it is set up is that anytime you make a change to it, it automatically updates on my end.
Oh, excellent.
But
so
what
calendar do you use? Outlook, or what calendar do you use?
I use iCalendar.
Interesting. I'll have to look that up. That sounds like a wonderful. Yeah, so it really doesn't affect the next few weeks. It really changes December. December is quite different. So because I've adjusted the way we do the health and healing. Okay. So I don't think I changed anything in November, but I could be wrong. So just an alert. Okay.
Off the top of your head, do we take a break around the holidays?
Oh, we don't. Yeah, we are not meeting on Thanksgiving Day.
Okay.
Okay. So yes, we take a break. And so that week is pretty well open. There's nothing going on that full week. So you have a week off from class and assignments, okay? Good. Now, a couple of things. We talked about habits last time. Hindu quiz, now available. I don't know if you got an email today, but finally I was able to get it done.
Yeah, I noticed.
It is the first quiz. And so if you sense mistakes in the quiz, I will authorize a piece of paper to be used to itemize any mistakes, and a bonus score if you find that they are substantive mistakes, as opposed to just periods and spaces and things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
And so at that point, because it's a closed quiz, you're not supposed to have anything around you, take the quiz, live with the consequences. I would warn you, it's hard. I didn't get the full quiz correct when I did my first run through of it. So it is a challenging quiz. I'm authorizing, I believe I've done the setting of you can do it twice, but it's going to be an average of the 2 scores. So you can live with the quiz, or you can take it a second time, but it's still going to average out. So it's a challenging quiz. Now, to do the quiz, you have the study guide. It's Hindu terms. It's the piece of paper I gave you. And I used almost exactly the definitions that are on the paper. And so it still remains challenging when you take it as a quiz. Okay? So please work at making sure you're comfortable with what's going on.
Okay. Just real quick, what I'm noticing is that we have classes running through December every Thursday. Is that correct?
Except for Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Yeah, I was speaking to December.
Yeah, I think 3 weeks in December is what I scheduled. The last week is just presentations. The last one, so we have the 3rd of December, the 10th, and the 17th.
Okay.
Okay. I really wanted to get into Jainism. And so I adjusted the schedule so we'd have enough time to work on Jainism. So I've given 2 weeks to Jainism, and I have a week of presentations where you can be teaching us whatever you're learning from your projects. Okay.
Okay.
So that's the 17th. And okay. Did you? I didn't do it. How'd you do it? Putting on yellow or orange? Oh, your hat. Was that conscious or just an accident?
No, it was conscious.
Oh, excellent.
And I have a yellow shirt on.
Oh, what? I can't quite see your shirt. What color is that?
It's yellow.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
And so in your Buddhist background, have you ever done a clothing adjustment?
No, not really.
Not really? Okay. Well, there we go. It's something new and different. And I screwed up. I forgot. So my apologies. Did you do any fruit delivery to anywhere, food banks, or anything else?
No, I did not. I donated to a charity last week.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can do that often, that's wonderful. Did you meditate once a day?
I did.
How often do you like to meditate each day? Is once go?
It's usually once a day, but maybe I wouldn't say that it's unoften for me to meditate twice daily. So once in the morning and once in the evening.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Did you use your clicker, your golf clicker, on your loving kindness assignment?
No.
Okay. I want you to think through today. Okay. How did your day go? Did you act with loving kindness to the first person you met today, whoever it was?
Yeah.
Okay. How about number 2?
Yes.
3?
Yes.
4?
Say around 4 or 5, I may have not acted out of
Okay,
kindness.
so we reset to 0.
Yeah.
And off we go again.
Mm-hmm.
Do you sense the assignment is designed to focus on the next person? Because when you talk to people, they'll tend to say, oh, I love everybody. Freud would say, therefore you don't love anyone, because you haven't consciously made that move. And your generalization actually makes it all meaningless. So I really like bringing it down to, are you doing it with the next person you meet? It was a technique of David Ram that I enjoyed in some of my professors and some of the books that I read. And so if you were to imagine life, what would be the average number that people would say if they've done this assignment, and all of my students have done this assignment? What would you say the average number is when they reset their clicker back to 0?
I would say it's less than 10.
Very much. The average is between 2 and 3. So you're bang on average. If they have a really good day and they've gone to a major event, they can get it up to 10 or 12 or 15. But for most people who are engaged with people, and this is more than just hello, how are you, and disappearing out of their lives, if
Right.
you're asking those that you've engaged with and had a meaningful conversation with, the average is 2 to 3 before they have to reset. So now I want you to reflect on who is the person that causes you to reset most often.
Right now,
You
it's
don't
my
have to
dad.
give me a name. Give me their role in your life.
Well, it's kind of one and the same, but it's my dad.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
And so why? Why does, and so again, when students are invited to give me the answer, the interesting response is it's the person closest to you.
Yeah. Which makes every bit of sense to me.
Okay. So the person closest to you will cause you not to act in loving kindness most often.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you would think it would be the inverse.
Yeah.
You're with that person. Love should be part and parcel of your relationship. But when you look at relational dynamics, the one that's closest to you will cause you to trip on your most important objective, and that's acting loving to another person.
Yeah.
And so that's universal.
Mm-hmm.
And so that becomes an interesting challenge of the whole concept of loving kindness. If we trip most often with those that are closest to us, then this becomes a very difficult exercise because that's where you're weakest. It isn't the friend that you see once a year that you can't act with loving kindness to. It's the person you see 3 or 4 or 10 times a day
Mm-hmm.
that you often trip and don't act in loving kindness. And so what's the takeaway of that?
Um, what's the takeaway? Well, that you have the opportunity so much a day, because if you do have an intimate relationship, whether it's with family or a significant other, that means that you have that many more opportunities to become aware of your interactions, and if you're coming from a loving, kind place. So that's a takeaway for me.
Sure.
Yeah. And it makes sense to me that I'm more triggered by my dad than I am with anybody else in public, because as a son, I have certain expectations of the ideal dad, and vice versa. And the buttons are easier to push um, when we know somebody that much better. When you're closer, the buttons are more available. And so between expectations and just being in vulnerable connection, then yeah, it's likely that you're going to be triggered somehow in those relationships.
Yep.
They're inherently disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so sometime this week, consciously work on preparing yourself for those triggers and preparing a loving response when you engage those triggers. Okay? And life will be better.
I agree.
Okay? Because boy, do we all have them. Oh, do we all have them? Oh, did you have a chance to watch any movies or books this week that were a reflection of Buddhism?
No, I did not choose to watch anything this week.
Okay, thank you. So there's there's a pretty good list there. The one I think that connects most with the awakening the Buddha within is Little Buddha, which is Tibetan Buddhism. I don't have you had a chance to see Little Buddha?
I have not.
It's an
No.
interesting one. It's an interesting one. It goes well with the early sections of his book, just to give you a visualization. of rebirths, and what the rebirth process is, particularly within Tibetan Buddhism. The lamas are expected to be reborn because of the amazing quality of their lives and the good karma that they have generated. They're expected to be reborn again. And then the hunt is worldwide trying to find that next incarnation of the Lama. And so it's a wonderful narrative of how they are searching for the next Lama. And it just is such a different perception than most Westerners have ever had. Any other questions or issues or stuff? Or
No, I don't have anything on the top of my head. Yeah, I'd say it's more of just a comment or a statement, but so I'm certified with ICISF, and it's International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, I think.
Okay.
Anyways, it's a certification I got when I was working with the Forest Service to become a member of a peer support team. So whenever there's a close call or traumatic event on the fire line, I can be called to respond. So it's very similar to what you're trying to set up in our community. It's generally just called CISM, which is Critical Incident Stress Management.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. Did you do that? Do you know that there are certified individuals in McCall with that certification?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a few of them, and a lot of them work at the jump base or are just kind of throughout the Forest Service. A lot of people are certified in McCall. And actually,
boy, is that ever a nice resource to know about.
Yeah, and I think McCall has actually or the Payette National Forest has actually assembled a whole team, a critical incident stress management team. So I could get a little more curious about that and connect you.
No, if you come across anything that might help me on the, I pretty well talk to everybody weekly. I just need to know what questions to ask. And you've given me an opportunity of asking the question.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Because there's some resources there that are now here that we can now transmit to another group of folks for non-forestry events.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
And the folks in the Forest Service could benefit from having a religious background and understanding for the work that they do get called out to do as well.
That's
so
the bridge, isn't it? That's the bridge. Yeah, they wouldn't have, other than often their own personal background, bring to the table.
Yeah.
Wow, boy, there's a lot of things to think about there. Thanks for putting that on the table. I'll go to work there and see what I can find.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah. I'll do my best to help you out.
Oh, and just are you planning to come to McCall at all this fall, or are you going to stay afield?
Yeah, I'm coming home around Tuesday.
Next week?
Yeah, so I should be able to actually join you in class on Thursday.
Wonderful. I hope everybody can be here then.
Yeah, me too.
They were saying 2 weeks out. I just didn't quite know. I think they were hunting this week is why they're not here. Is my memory of what happened. Be great to have you all in class. It's a great experience.
I would enjoy that immensely.
Let's go back through the history of the Buddha.
Okay.
Do you need to take a break now? Might be a good time.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind using the bathroom real quick.
Let's do 5. I'm seeing 20 after. Let's do 25 after. Okay.
Sounds good.
See you in 5.
Okay. Cool. I'm back.
Thank you. So I think the way I'd like to handle the history
Uh-huh.
is for you to tell me what you know, and I'll fill in the holes.
Okay.
Does that sound challenging enough?
That sounds good.
Because
Yeah.
it always frustrates me to teach students what they already know.
Yeah.
So that's not a lot of fun for anybody. So I'll probably be going through this section asking what's your awareness, and then you can reiterate that, and I'll work with you. The real challenge to the biography of the Buddha is that each of the different traditions, Japanese, Chinese, Tibetan, they all have slightly different biographies, and so there's always nuances between the various biographies of the Buddha. And so you're never quite sure if you're talking about Japanese tradition or Chinese or Tibetan or what you're talking about. So that's always one of the challenges biographically with him. But because it's the Buddha, and the Buddha has indicated that that there were many Buddhas before him. Are you aware of any of the stories of before the Buddha was the Buddha?
So if I'm correct, I think his lifetime was somewhere around 500 BCE, correct?
563.
Yeah, 563. Yeah, and he was prince
Good.
of a royal family. I don't know where exactly.
Okay.
And yeah, he was well, in a story that I read, that he was born a bodhisattva, but maybe not his awareness at a young age. But he was sheltered from the suffering in the world and suffering in the kingdom. And yeah, at some point he, I know that he, they would go on these royal parades through town, and like
Okay,
all
so
of the.
we'll hold off there.
Okay.
So anything before the parades? Anything else?
No, I don't. Not that I know of.
Excellent. So let me fill in some holes.
Okay.
And so prior to his birth as the Buddha in 563, they talk about the previous lives. And one of the previous lives they talk about is Prince Mahasattva, who was strolling in the forest and comes upon a tigress and 7 cubs. The tigress was too weak to care for the newborns. The prince decided to give his life to save the family. He slit his throat to cover himself with blood that the tigress ate and regained strength. Buddha was that prince.
Mm.
Buddha grew in compassion and perfected his wisdom with each life. And so that whole sense of rebirth is a natural storytelling event of what are the previous lives that contributed to the amazing enlightenment of the Buddha. And so you can imagine the texts would regale with those kinds of stories as they imagine, as they learn, as they write down so many of the texts. And that would become fascinating knowledge. You're quite right on his parents were royal. The kingdom they were the royals of was Nepal.
Oh, okay.
Okay. One of the stories of his mother was his mother-to-be saw a white elephant approach and enter her body. She gave birth from her side standing up. 4 guardian kings placed him in a golden net. The heavens shook. Other signs of a worldwide event were also present. And so you get the narration of importance. Can you think of any other religions that also had equivalent narrations of importance? as to who this baby is?
Yeah,
Or who the mother is. Put either one into the storytelling.
yeah. I don't know if Christ's birth is of the same significance.
In our setting, Christ's birth is classic, um, and how is it distinctive?
Um,
So the virgin birth would be a classic distinction of the Christian narrative. The star in the east, the wise men, angels becoming a heavenly choir. So that's normal. We'll see this when we get to Jainism. I won't tell the tale there, but we'll also see it again with Jainism, where the mother and the baby are very, very distinctive. We'll see it in Judaism with the story of Moses. Can you think of anything in the story of Moses that is unique?
Not around his birth. Yeah. I don't know the story well enough.
His story was that his mother was afraid for his life and put him in a basket in the Nile River. And the Pharaoh's daughter found the basket and raised him as her child and brought in the mother as the nurse mom. And so it's an intriguing story even on that level, a little more realistic than we might encounter.
Yeah.
We don't get much out of the Muhammad story that's similar, but we'll tell some next semester. So it's intriguing. These are markers that people use to validate people they venerate. That these narrations come quite naturally, and people use them often. The tragedy of the Buddha's life is his mother died at 7 days. And so if you look at his life psychologically, you will certainly pin that event as a significant point in his life, to not have a mother and to have a father who's the king. So you can do all sorts of psychological analysis quite quickly on what this little guy's life would be like as a result of that trauma in his life.
Yeah. What does it say why she died?
I imagine it would be considered a post-childbirth death.
Yeah.
As a result of the stress of delivering the baby, even though that there's some other issues there. No, the story was she delivered him standing up through her side, and so you wonder if that was an ectopic pregnancy. That they delivered the baby ectopically, which would be which would naturally be a life-threatening. I literally was in an OR in Africa dealing with an ectopic pregnancy, and the surgeons were desperately trying to save the mother's life, and they eventually failed.
Wow.
They managed to save the baby. And so ectopic pregnancies are fairly, and those are extrauterine, so that they're on the outside of the womb, literally growing into the other spaces of the body. So it's a very traumatic experience. So you wonder what happened. We don't know.
Yeah.
And as you recall, we talked about this last how many years before we actually had a biographer write anything down?
Yeah, it was like 600 years.
600 years. Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you may recall he was married and he had a child. So whatever the rest of his story is, there's a mom and a baby left behind that I think is intriguing to the story. We see that in other religions. We'll see that in Christianity with his disciples. We'll see that in Jainism with his disciples. We'll see that to some degree in Judaism. We don't get a lot of story in Confucius on this one. Don't get a lot of story on Lao Tzu on this one from Taoism. But they often leave it behind. Okay, good. What you started to develop was the Great Renunciation. Tell me about the parade.
Um, well, he's riding royally through the streets, and
What's the
his
point of the
father,
parade?
I forget, what is the point of the parade?
He needed to see his kingdom.
Okay.
Okay, and so he had not he'd been had been restricted to the palace. Knew there's obviously things out there that he didn't know, and wanted to know it. And so the royal consorts put together a parade for him, and they were going to do it. They were going to make it just the best.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
keep talking. What happened on the parade?
yeah. And part of organizing that parade was that there was no no elders, like,
Okay,
and you
so
know,
there was no old people,
no old people, nobody that was dismembered or born with defects,
right?
um, no beggars, no poor people.
Right.
Um, what else?
There are what is called the four sites of the Great Renunciation, and you got two of them. An old decrepit man, and so what the way the story goes is he refused to stay on the path of the parade, got off of
Yeah,
his elephant or his chariot, and went into the town and saw four things, the four great sights. The first, an old decrepit man, and therefore he learned about the struggles of old age. He saw a diseased man, the struggle of health. He saw a dead man, the struggle
mm,
of death. And he saw a hermit, one who had withdrawn from the world and seemed above all the struggles. And he clearly then chose the fourth. And the fourth
yeah,
became his life.
yes,
And that is where he discovered truth. And so when he
yeah.
made this decision to be a hermit within basically a Hindu society, what's he going to
Yeah.
do?
He's gonna leave behind everything that
Okay.
he owns. He's gonna leave behind his family. Um, I think this would be a practice of asceticism,
Asceticism.
um, asceticism, and yeah, and he's gonna flee to pretty much the woods and live on the outskirts and live off of, I don't, you know, if he would live off of alms, but yeah, he pretty much retreats to the forest, and I think part of his journey was fasting, and
Hmm.
you know, um, kind of letting go of all earthly interaction in a way in this pursuit of enlightenment. I
And
don't know how
so,
you would say that
under
differently.
the rubric of Hinduism that we've already worked on, why is that successful?
Um,
Why did spiritual enlightenment come from that practice of extreme asceticism?
yeah, because you're resorting to everything within you.
Mm-hmm. The
Um,
assumption is everything is within, therefore you go
yeah,
on a great journey within you.
yeah.
Okay? Why the fasting? Why the bad haircuts and poor clothes? Why the no family around you? What are you accomplishing?
Um, I guess you're accomplishing non-attachment with the earthly plane.
Excellent, because your attachments will force you to think outside of yourself. And the goal will be to be reflective within the Atman, which is within. You can only find it
Yeah,
if you detach from all
yeah,
of your all of the things that are desperately trying to pull you into the natural world. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So he did 6
Yes.
years of that wandering, studying, learning the yogic knowledge and the techniques. He was as extreme as you can imagine. This is why the happy Buddha picture is always sort of a challenge for me, because there's no way he came out of that without probably looking pretty thin the rest of his life. That's a pretty
Yeah.
transformative way. When he would have known about the Jains, and we're going to learn about Mahavira with the next, and we're going to discover that Mahavira will probably be the most extreme of extremes when it comes to the yogic knowledge and practices, attempting at extreme self-mortification. And so he would have known about that, probably as aggressive as we will discover with the Jains. And then something brought him out of that. Do you know the story that brought him out of his extreme asceticism?
It was part of one of the scriptures that I read today.
Excellent.
Um, oh man. Yeah, he wasn't eating, he was sitting beneath the tree.
Before the tree.
And
we haven't got
before the tree?
Before the tree.
Okay.
He's by a river.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe the scripture that I read didn't depict this part.
And he meets someone. Really? Who does he meet?
His first 5 disciples?
No, not yet. That's going to be after the tree. Okay. He meets a woman, which is going to be so important to Buddhism in the long run. He meets a woman, and what does she do for him? She's a cowherd woman, so she's a peasant.
Uh-huh.
And she brought him rice.
Yeah, she feeds him.
And she fed him. And he ate it, which would have been a diminishment of his extreme asceticism. I mean, he's probably eating bugs. And at 6 years, he's in the extreme asceticism part of his life. And so he's just absolute minimum. And the sense is she brings him a bowl. And the bowl will become our primary symbol of Buddhism, is the begging bowl. But it's not a tiny bowl. It's not 2 grains of rice. The bowl is always a pretty good sized bowl.
Yeah.
Because what he accepted was a pretty good sized portion of rice. What's that pointing to now? There's a name that we want to give this. He's lived the royal life. He rejected it. He's had 6 years of extreme asceticism. He's going to reject it. Where is he going?
The middle path.
The middle way. Okay?
Yeah.
And so Buddhism is the middle path. And it's a really important intellectual name to understand. Again, and this is where I draw some of my complementary thought, is this same idea of what's the middle path. The middle path is between the 2 extremes. Both of them are productive, but when pushed too hard, they become destructive. The royal path is productive, but when pushed too hard, becomes destructive on any person. Extreme asceticism is productive in so many ways, but when pushed too hard, becomes destructive on the human being. There's a middle path that is the path of enlightenment, path toward enlightenment that you can follow. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, and then he comes to the Bodhi tree. What do you know there?
Gosh, did he sit there for 7 days?
My memory of that, and I don't have that in my notes, is this was a 40-day journey.
Okay.
But I'll relook that up again. And the reason is in almost all the ancient literature, their wilderness experience is a 40-day. 40 days is classic for habit readjustment. 40 days is classic for fasting because it engages you at the most deepest level is when you get to 40 days with a major fast. And so my memory is 40. I will certainly try and look that up. And so continue.
Um, yeah, in general, I just know that this is like where he sits and meditates,
Okay.
And I don't know any other details of the journey.
And his meditation was successful because the narrative that you find in much of the literature is conquering of Mara, which is sort of the devil within Buddhist thinking, the one that comes and tempts you with all the temptations of humanity. And his meditation, he was able to control them. His Buddhahood comes from what we call the four watches. And so and again, four is normal of human existence, of earthly existence. You create perfection in this plane if you do it in four spheres. As the compass has 4 points, as the seasons are four is that number of completion within ancient thought everywhere. His first watch was to review all his former existences. Okay, so you can imagine sequentially going back and thinking of that which has constructed you. We do the same when we think of our ancestors. I don't know, do you ever go on ancestry.com?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I get the biggest charge out of going backwards. As far as I can go, and with ancestry.com, you can really go backwards. And you sort of get a sense of your inputs when you do that. Is there anybody in your past that you realize, wow, I'm sort of like that? Or I didn't know that story, but it sort of makes sense about who I am. Have you had any stories like that?
Yeah, for sure.
Have you heard my story of my first ancestor in America?
No, I have not.
Oh, my first ancestor in America is on my mother's side. Arrived in 1633. Pretty impressive, huh?
Wow.
So, do you know when the Mayflower arrived?
No.
1620. Okay, so 13 years after the Mayflower, in exactly the same place, my ancestors arrived.
Wow.
We know that because their first child, they had I think 6 or 8 children. Their first child born in America was 1633. Her name was Sarah. And so we're able to trace that. And Sarah becomes an incredibly interesting person. When I put her name into Ancestry.com, I got all sorts of photographs. And it was because Sarah was one of the witches burned in the Salem witch trial.
Whoa.
And you sort of go, whoa, is this ever an interesting religious background I've got now? And so,
yeah.
you just sort of go, okay, this is interesting. And so that, and then the family progresses. I've got people that have fought on both sides of the American Revolution, both patriots and loyalists. And if you ask why I'm a Canadian, it's because the loyalists left and went to Canada, and my family became Canadian. So it's an intriguing story. So it's fun to know these. And so when you realize that, you say, okay, well, what are all their inputs into my life? And it's a very similar process to the Buddha going through and assembling his former experiences in this lifetime. That prince we talked about, what that would mean for a prince to give himself that way and to know that story and to review that story and just go through the thousands of stories that may be welling up into this. He then turned his compassionate mind to the suffering of others. And that goes back to the parade and how the parade influenced him. And here I want to stop, because the key virtue of Buddhism is seeing the suffering of others. And if I were to launch a critique on modern Buddhism, they don't. American Buddhism. I don't think they fixate, as they should, on the suffering of others. But the key characteristic of the Buddha is his fixation on suffering. Do you think my critique is fair?
Yeah, personally, I feel like my studies have brought me to a place where I can see the suffering in others. Um, and I can't speak for everybody. So I understand what you're saying, and I could see how American culture could dismiss that virtue of Buddhism, and more or less make it a practice of being with the self and meditating and creating this a lack of suffering in their own world, but not creating the ability to see how others are suffering in the world. It's still kind of self-centric. Is that what you're saying?
There's the critique of Hinduism. Hinduism will create an incredibly self-centered individual. If they are journeying into the forest to discover themselves, if they're leaving it all behind, then the social critique is you are leaving your responsibilities in your community and those that you are responsible for, and you're doing nothing to help the community. The response of the priestly tradition is, but that's our role, is to pray, to meditate, to do those things that no one else has time to do, so that we can be generating merit for our community. You may remember the merit-based discussion we used with the story of the Nepalese death. As we were discovering, their logic is, I will put a child into the priesthood so they can generate incredible amounts of merit, because in our family, we don't have time to do that. We're just going to be living life. So we need somebody that will go into the priesthood and generate crazy amounts of merit that we can all enjoy. And so that becomes the great challenge is how do you do that? And so the assumption is, if I go into the forest, I'm generating enormous amounts of merit for my family and everybody else, and they're better off if I go in the forest. Does that logic make some sort of sense?
Yes.
And so, but the defect is they're really self-centered. Okay, at the end of the day, they're really self-centered. And so here the Buddha is, instead of being fixated on the symbolisms of business like we live in our lives, he's trying to teach them to be fixated. If you're going to get out of yourself, fixate on the suffering of others. And that's good karma. Whereas if you fixate on the consumerism that is all around you, you're going to be generating bad karma on top of bad karma most of the time. And so you want people to get out of themselves. You want them to be, in the language of psychology, other-centered. But you want it to be on the right centering. And suffering puts you in the right place. And so this is our health and healing kind of conversation. We want to make sure, how does Buddhism help in the health and healing conversation that all humanity is trapped in? It's because of its fixation on suffering. And when it's fixated, it can now go to a helpful place with all people that are all suffering. Okay, so that real sense of, to keep Buddhism healthy, you have to drive it to suffering. And if there's anything Americans don't like, we're called the Tylenol generation. We want to take a pill for our suffering. Okay? Yeah. We do not want to fixate on suffering. We don't have the resources or the arrows in our quiver to handle it. And that's the point. That will drive you to a better place. And so on the second watch, He attained the divine eye to see the whole world, and he saw repeated birth and death. So he was seeing samsara. He was seeing that the cause of suffering is the repetition of birth and death, a terrible life, dying, birth, a terrible life, dying, birth, a terrible life of suffering, dying, and people were trapped on the wheel of samsara. And he was visioning that, and he was able to understand what was going on. And the natural result of that is compassion. How do you grow compassion in others? Put them in a setting of suffering and get them to realize they want to help, but they don't know what to do. And so the first sense is become aware of the suffering. The second sense is allow compassion to well up in you so that you can do something. On the third watch, he saw the causes of endless rebirth, and that's ignorance and yearning for existence. You don't know what to do, but you want to keep living. And that existence is putting you into that gerbil wheel of living and dying. And in reality, you're simply responding to the desires of the world, and that's keeping you in this yearning for existence. He saw the path for cessation of the cessation of the cycle, and that's the Eightfold Noble Path. And so the place of the Eightfold Path is right here. And so you become aware of suffering, you build compassion on others because you know they're trapped in a gerbil wheel of life, and you give them a new path to carry them out of that, to grow good karma, and to make life meaningful. And that's the Eightfold Path.
Yeah.
So that was the third watch, please.
And that's the work of a bodhisattva.
And that's the work of the bodhisattva, absolutely. And so the definition being those that could be enlightened, could transition into that next realm. We'll talk about this. This is the hardest conversation, but they choose to maintain their walk in this world. The fourth watch, the dawn appeared, and the world was transformed, was tranquil. Okay, that was his enlightenment, and that enlightenment was there. The next phase in his life is turning the Dharma wheel. Now go to what you know about his disciples.
They were 5 ascetic Hindu men.
Yeah.
And I feel like they encountered him sometime before the tree when he was also an ascetic.
Right. That's correct.
And so when he reappeared in it was a little village, and it's the story of Byram, or I forget the name. I want to look it up. Anyways, he reconnects these 5 ascetics, see him walk into this village or something, and they pretty much, he's like, he has all these adornments and he looks healthy. He's been eating, like he doesn't have the image of an ascetic anymore. And
right.
So they don't
reject him.
Yeah, but not completely. They still put out a seat for him to sit.
Okay.
They said if he comes over and sits, then he can sit. But otherwise, we don't want anything to do with him.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and so he speaks to them of his enlightenment and what he has come to see from his ways, and he had to tell them multiple times to gain their trust.
Right.
And
what did he teach them? We just covered. Go over it again.
He taught them
These become the Four Noble Truths.
Okay. And so the four watches become the four noble truths?
That's right. So what did he learn in the first watch?
Oh, shoot.
It's okay. Just walk through it.
Yeah.
First thing you have to do is be aware. Aware of what?
Aware of the cycle?
Not yet.
No.
Okay.
Aware of the.
What he saw out of the parade.
Oh, you have to be aware of suffering.
You have to be aware of suffering. Okay, so
Yeah.
your first noble truth is all individuals of sorrow, birth, age, disease, death, contact with the unpleasant, separation from the pleasant, and every wish unfulfilled. That creates sorrow and suffering. So the first noble truth is all linked to all these parts of his biography, is awareness of sorrow and suffering. Okay, once you've taught them that, what do you got to do next? Second watch.
Develop compassion.
Got to develop compassion. And that's the noble truth of arising from sorrow. How do you get people out of sorrow? How do you get yourself out of sorrow? You become focused on the other person, and you build compassion for that other person. Sorrow arises from craving, sensual pleasure, continued life, power, which leads to rebirth. And so teaching people that your compassion is to make them aware of what's causing their problems. And you spend time with them and you build with them to do that. And that leads to the next noble truth of how do you stop? It's a noble truth of stopping the sorrow. How do you stop the craving so that no passion remains? You have to leave it. You have to be free from it. You have to be released from it. Give it no place. And so that sense of restraint, that sense of meditation, that sense of teaching folks how to become enlightened in the first instinct. It's not that full enlightenment, but it's that first instinct. It's the yoga. It's that ability to not allow desires to overwhelm you. And so you're happy in one place instead of walking down the path of business every minute of your life. You're doing those things that restrain you. It's your discipline. It's being aware of the discipline and engaging in the discipline. And so that's the third noble truth, is stopping the sorrow. And the last one is the truth of the way. And so many of the ancient religions use this as their metaphor. We're going to make you aware. We're going to make you transform your life, and then we're going to give you a path to walk on. So the fourth noble truth is the path we're going to give you, and we call it what? What's the path of Buddhism?
The middle way.
The middle way. And what's the path called? We give it a number.
The Eightfold Path.
Eightfold Path. Now, why 8? The ancients have always used 8 for specific purposes.
Yeah, I don't know why.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 is the number of perfection. It completes the cycle. 8 is the new day, the new way, the new part. Your normal week has 7 days. We all know that.
Yeah.
The first day of the new week is exactly that. You're a new person. You're on a new path. And so 8 is always the beginning of newness that you're seeing here, that in Buddhism is representing that 8th day, which is the Eightfold Path. And so the Eightfold Path: right views, right resolve, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration is your Eightfold Path. Okay? Good job, boy. So I'm just hoping it's creating sequence for you so that it's easy to understand. And we see that he retained samsara. And samsara, that cycle that he had, he kept. And so The cycle of suffering is you don't see things well. Your emotions are afflicted because of that misperception. You react with actions, and that creates bad karma. And you have a compulsive life that the world around you wants to give you. And that's samsara, which again leads to misperceptions, which leads to more desire and emotions, which leads to bad karma, which leads to that bad life. And so the cycle of freedom is a new outlook, which allows you to meditate, which allows you to create a new lifestyle, which allows you to give you a conscious life. And the definition of conscious life is nirvana. And that gives you more wisdom, which now encourages you to meditate, which gives you a new lifestyle, which takes you to nirvana, which gives you more wisdom. So there's the cycle of freedom that Buddhism has created to give you this upward path. So instead of samsara with this cycling downward, your Buddhist path takes you on this ever improving life and lifestyle. Okay? And so you see where nirvana enters into it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of this like titration.
Explain.
Titration is kind of like, it's a cyclical or like a spiral approach to, therapists use it in trauma. When somebody has experienced trauma in their life and they're trying to work through it, they'll start in a stable, grounded place, and they'll move towards the trigger and take on as much as they can, and then come back to this grounded place. And then the ideology is that they can come back to this place of trauma again, but a little bit deeper, and have a little bit deeper understanding of it, and hopefully create a little bit more healing before it's too much for them to handle, and then come back to the grounded, stable place. So it's this kind of cyclical spiral.
Excellent.
Where, and I'm comparing that to the Eightfold Path, because you can, follow these steps and like have a moment of enlightenment, and you're like, oh, I see, I know, I understand, and I'm going to change and go through all these steps again to reach enlightenment again, or in a new sense. And so titrating is to come to and then move away, to come to and move away, in a sense. That's how I know it.
So they use the term titration for that. That's interesting within biology. Titration is that using little bits of drops to put a reagent into a solution. You titrate the reagent in your eyedropper into the solution, and we call that titration. So that's my use of the word. How would that be similar?
It's kind of synonymous with moderating. Is that what I'm getting? Moderating.
Giving little bits.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. Giving little bits, moderating, and so that, I mean, maybe in a sense,
making
like,
a decision how much they can handle. Taking them to the story, taking them to improvement, taking them to overcoming what they've already talked about, and then going to the next little bit and moving them through that. And so we can see the very good psychology of Buddhism here. It's very, very good psychology. And it's why it works, is because the psychology is well grounded. Hinduism works because it creates stability. And the psychology is also useful, but Buddhism is going to be rejecting an awful lot of Hinduism. And as we come back to your story of the 5 disciples, and again, those 5 disciples that rejected him are now going to be his first community. And what do we call the community of Buddhism?
Sangha.
The Sangha. And so these first five are all become enlightened, and they are given the title of the worthy ones. And that grew to 60 enlightened monks, and it's his first 60. Again, another element of numerology, having meaning. And your major digital points, 10, 12, 24, 30, 60, 100. And so here we have 60 enlightened monks, and he sent them out as missionaries. But what did he do with the caste system? Now, if you imagine he's in the middle of India, he's got a caste system all around him. He's got these five probably high caste individuals that are his first monks. What's the decision here? Am I only going to go and suck up Brahmins? He's got to make this as an early decision. Am I only going to find Brahmins because in the tradition and the context I'm in, they are the ones that can afford to be enlightened because they've got enough resources to support them.
Yeah.
So what's his decision?
To break the caste system, to not go along with it.
Exactly. So now what can he do? He can accept all castes into Buddhism.
Yeah.
Which is the reason why Buddhism left India and had very little impact into India, because they rejected Dharma as a Hindu knew it. And so you're also going to have to redefine the term Dharma. And Dharma within Buddhism means what to you?
Wisdom.
Yeah, it means truth. It means wisdom. It means a good path. So Dharma, as opposed to the social order, caste system in Hinduism, is now being transitioned into wisdom and truth and pathways. This is the Dharma. This is like the Sangha in many ways, is the path you're going to live on with your community. So there's going to be a transition of that word out of the caste system.
Yeah, it's almost like a moral and intellectual structure in the Buddhist sense, as opposed to an actual caste structure or organization.
A social system. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So we move into that moral system, and we move out of the social system. And so what did he do with women?
Well, he eventually did accept them into their community, but
you got to get the butt in here. What's the butt?
But women were to bow and to rise in the presence of any and every monk, even if they had just been initiated, and the nun had been there for hundreds of years. So there's still this like lack of equality between monks and nuns, but they are accepted into.
So the good news is we deconstructed the caste system.
Yeah.
But we never really broke with the gender caste system that's part of the ancient humanity. And the perception of women didn't get broken. And probably the great contribution of Western society, particularly within American society, is they'll be able to break the caste system of gender in Buddhism. And that will get broken. But it'll take in our lifetime, basically, that caste system will be broken. And so he created a separate order of nuns, and some of the nuns were able to achieve full enlightenment, but as you mentioned, they're subordinate to all monks. Now, there were 4 precepts for a monk in Buddhism. Do you have any sense of what those are? So you're given your robe, okay, and you're now a Buddhist monk. What do they expect of you?
Abstinence.
Abstinence, yep. First
And
precept.
I think in some, yeah, and I think in some cases, like it was still allowed within marriage.
And typically,
Maybe.
if they have been married, they're flexible, but often they can't rise to the elites of the monks if they remain married.
Yeah.
So they're often
Um,
accepted, but they're sort of second class,
yeah.
even if they don't say it.
Yeah. So
Okay?
abstinence,
Abstinence.
no killing,
Nonviolence. Second
nonviolence.
precept.
Yeah. No stealing.
Okay. Doesn't rise.
And
It doesn't rise to the level of a precept, but it's certainly part of the Eightfold Path.
okay. And then
So they're going to give you a symbol. When you get your robe, you're going to get really two things. You're going to get your robe, and you're going to get a. Or why do you need the robe? You're going to have your orange or yellow robe, but why do you need it?
Yeah. Well, because it symbolizes something.
What are you going to take off to put on your robe?
Oh, your own clothes, your belongings.
All of your belongings. So the third precept is you have no possessions. Okay?
Okay.
Now, and they're going to give you one more thing. You're going to get your robe and you're going to get one more thing. What is it? We talked about it already today. He received his by the river.
Oh, his bowl.
Begging bowl.
Yeah.
The classic symbol of Buddhism is the begging bowl. Because you will spend the rest of your life begging. So you have no possessions, you don't own anything, therefore you have to ask for it. And you become subservient to all people because you don't create your own food. And so you go begging. So those are the four precepts: abstinence, chastity, nonviolence, no possessions, and begging for food. Okay?
Yeah.
So those are the four precepts of Buddhism. And again, American Buddhism is not going to be happy now. Okay? Those are the four premier virtues of Buddhism, and which ones are not going to make the boat to America?
Yeah. Abstinence.
Abstinence is not going to make the boat.
Not going to beg for food.
Not going to beg for food. That's not going to make the boat. And?
Yeah. Oh yeah, and releasing all your belongings.
They're going to maintain their own possessions. Yeah, that's not going to make the boat. Therefore,
that leaves us with do not harm.
The only one is non-imposed. That's the only one that made it to America. And so you have to sort of sit back and look and go, wow, this is tough. How do you maintain Buddhism when you're releasing the precepts? And what's the point of the precepts? Well, why do you impose those on your elite monks? You don't impose those on your laity, the people in their houses. You don't impose that on them, but you impose it on your monks. Why?
So that you have this group of people that aren't seeking enlightenment just for themselves.
Excellent.
But for everybody. And so that there's this symbiotic relationship between ladies and monks that, you know, the lay people will offer food and the monks will offer good karma.
Yeah. You can't be a very good missionary if you stay in the forest or in the monastery.
Yeah.
You just can't. You're not in the midst of people's lives. So this is a natural pathway to keep engaging the rest of the culture, rest of the society. It really is an amazing missionary pathway. That clearly was the reason they went down the road. It might be for more food. Didn't have enough where they are, get down the road and go find some more. The Hindu society is used to feeding their monks. There's a natural acceptance of the next monk coming down the road. And you've got a person in pain and suffering because they're living in samsara. And you have a natural way of, hey, let me tell you something. And your missionary journey is natural with this. Chastity is normal for spiritual elites. Why?
Well, because it's a powerful sensation and it's distracting.
Yeah. Your opposite sex is going to mess with you in ways you can't control. And as I've said, biology always trumps brains. And so you better know that your biology will not be able to trump your brains if you're trying to live this new enlightened life. Forget it. Your biology will trump it every time. And so the Buddha obviously knew that, and it comes from his asceticism. So we sit around and say, oh, we can control our biology. So we'll have married pastors and priests as our spiritual elites. But I promise you, the ancients knew something we're not prepared to admit, that you aren't a very good missionary if you maintain your focus on your family. You just can't. You have to, your biology carries you there. And so the same with possessions and food. Okay. They accepted lay adherents, and those were supporters who were expected to live meritorious life. Okay. The death of the Buddha is an important event in Buddhism. Tell me what you know. How old was he?
I don't know.
80.
Okay.
Pretty good, huh?
The Buddha was 80. Yeah, great.
80, almost 80. Yeah, late 70s is the tradition. How does that compare to other founders? You know the ages of any of the other founders? When they died?
I'd say they were much younger.
Can you reference a few?
Let's
do you know Confucius?
No.
60s.
Okay.
Lao-Tzu, 70s. Moses, 60s. Muhammad, 60s. Jesus, here is the big one.
Yeah, in his 30s.
30s, yeah. So 80s, late 70s, 80s, really at the end of life. Do you know what the lifespan would be? 500 BCE?
Oh, gosh.
40?
40, yeah.
40 to 50? 50, old man.
Yeah.
That's why they put 65 as the start of Social Security, because everybody was dead by the time of 65. even in the 60s and the 50s, for our generation, everybody's dead in the 65. So it's a great age to start giving them any money. Well, we messed that one up. So almost 80, and so therefore he's had his entire life, a long life, to build his community.
Yeah.
Great struggle of Christianity. The guy dies at 33.
Yeah.
No community as such. No way to massage the community, make the community better. Use that feedback system that everybody else is going to have to build their community. And the Buddha has a fabulous lifetime to build community. So we would expect a very good social structure in Buddhism, and that's what we find. We expect a very poor social structure in Christianity. Guess what we find? And so we have craziness like the American social structure built on Christianity. Not a good model to build on, because there really isn't anything to build on as far as social structure. And so Buddhism is a great social structure for companies. Okay, and so he told his monks, be your own lambs, be your own refugees, take refuge in nothing outside yourselves, hold firm to the truth. We must sever ourselves from all things near and dear to us. In other words, hey guys, I'm going to die here. I'm not trying to be God here. I'm not going to live forever. I'm going to die, and you got to figure out your own path. His last words, all composite things must pass away. Strive on vigilantly. And he completed parinirvana, which is the complete liberation without any ties remaining, to pull him back into another lifetime of samsara. They had a funeral pyre, and his bones were sent to the stupas of 8 kingdoms of the neighboring regions. Okay. Life of the Buddha.
Life of the Buddha.
Ready?
Yeah.
So there's a few more things we'll talk about next time, but I think this is a good place to stop.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you. That was a good rehearsal. What did you discover this time through the biography that you didn't know or that was interesting to you?
I think kind of knowing what his teachings are based on, as far as the 4 watches and the 4 precepts. So yeah, kind of some of these like foundational philosophies, and how they tie into the story. So just to review for myself, the 4 watches of, awareness of suffering, and then compassionate awareness, and then oh man.
How do you stop the suffering?
Yeah. So the cessation of suffering through meditation.
Yes, meditation is going to be your primary task of stopping suffering.
Yeah.
And that leads you to what? The 4th noble truth.
Yeah. Enlightenment.
I place enlightenment, that first stage of enlightenment, more in the third noble truth, and that really in the meditation part.
Okay.
What does he do after he's enlightened?
Experiences nirvana, or
he
comes
then
back.
Gets on the path to go teach others.
Okay.
Okay.
And
so I tend to, visually put enlightenment in that third truth, so that in the 4th truth, I'm on the road. I'm now a missionary. I'm telling others I'm living a good life. I'm telling them what the good life is.
Yeah.
So it's that pathway. It's the Eightfold Path. Is the fourth noble truth, and then you go through the Eightfold Path. But I think the first step tonight is what you're memorizing, is the 4 noble truths that we all need to rethink about. Is to be aware of suffering, to have the compassion to respond to that suffering, to have enlightenment, to have that meditation, so that we're preparing ourselves to do something and then doing something.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's the natural 4-step sequence that helps in the memorization of the 4 noble truths. Okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. For next time, and this week for an assignment, I'd like for you to give me a first draft of what did I call it? The first draft of the World Religion Supplement Project. So it'd be mostly, give me an outline of what you think would be on. If you go through the various projects that you've seen from students, they're often 4 to 6 segments of stuff on the page. Okay, well, what 4 to 6 segments would you put of stuff on your page? So it's basically give me an outline.
Cool.
Okay, of what you think you need to do to accomplish your project. Remind me what your project is again.
Relationships within Hinduism.
Excellent. Okay, how are those built? Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And so Nat, do you have an instinct of what might be in your project? Do you have a flow in your head yet?
Mm, no, not yet.
Okay, because I think
Um,
I would naturally fall back to the four stages of Hindu life.
yeah,
The sense of youth, middle age, older age, and enlightenment, and death.
yeah,
And all of
yeah,
those would have a different relational status. In your
yeah,
early youth, you're building a family, your relationships are there. In your middle adult, you're building your economic relationships. In your senior adult, you're in your retirement relationships. And in your final stages of life, you're breaking relationships. But you're doing it in a way that allows the relationship to survive your death. So that's just my first instincts. Is maybe
okay.
those four stages are
Mhm.
you could break your relationship analysis into those four stages. Just messing with you, throwing things on the table.
Yeah,
Go where you want to go.
yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Okay,
So that'd be my first instinct. Okay.
okay.
But I'd like to
Yeah,
see a first draft outline. I'd like to see a little research. What are you going to research to inform your ideas? And again, it's a first draft, so we're just going to bang it around and see what comes of it. Okay.
okay.
And please go back
Yeah,
to those other things we're practicing. We're trying to practice with visualization. Thank you for wearing the hat. We're
yeah.
practicing our loving kindness. We're practicing donating food, and watching a movie, reading a book, doing something to inform and move the fog of ignorance away. Okay.
Sounds great. Thanks for the private lesson.
Oh, hopefully they'll watch it too. So we're allowing
Yeah,
both Colton and Kate to also learn from tonight. So I really
mhm.
appreciate having you there. Doing a
Yeah,
lecture to an empty room is not my style of delivering a lecture. So,
yeah, yeah.
whew,
I can
so
imagine.
much better than that. Okay,
Yeah. All right. We'll take care, and I'll see you next week.
we'll see you next week. Good night now.
Okay. Bye, Brian.
Bye bye now.